So welcome. Oh, wow. That works. Microphone works. I'm Larry Maccherone, and I'll start off with this quote from Freeform Dynamics, a study they did. It mentions that only 21% of companies believe they have the culture necessary for their ops and their security teams to work well with their development teams. And so this is a big problem. If they don't have the culture to work well together, DevOps and DevSecOps are just not going to work. So this talk is largely about how you adopt that culture, how you transform the organization so that you do have that trust between those two sort of constituencies. A little bit about my background. Graduated from Virginia Tech with an electrical computer engineering degree. Is there a Hokies? Yeah, Hokies. I still have season tickets, so try to go to every home game. Were you at the UNC game the other day? Oh my God, what an ending. Yeah, so crazy. No UVA folks in the room, right? Get out of here. You just from Charlottesville? I'm a Dave Matthews fan. Started my first business while I was still an undergrad at Tech. Factory floor automation, process controls. Our biggest client was GE Power Generation. We wrote the software that controlled 60% of the world's power generation. So if there were vulnerabilities in our software, the bad guys got to those vulnerabilities, they could literally bring down the world's power grid. So we got really good at writing software, high security, high reliability software. And I packaged that up into a framework, essentially, and started marketing that as a separate product. That's where the Qualtrics logo up there comes from. Carnegie Mellon, I started reading my stuff and research. There was research projects at Carnegie Mellon along similar lines, but they hadn't had the practical application of it and experience. So they asked me to come there and launch an entity at Carnegie Mellon called the Scilab. So I was one of the original founders of the Scilab at Carnegie Mellon. Cybersecurity Lab is what it's sort of referred to. While I was there, I helped launch the Build Security In initiative for the Department of Homeland Security, and that's where we really put out my my framework as a framework for adoption for the whole industry. I was going to change the world. That's why I went to Carnegie Mellon. That's why I created Qualtrics. Going to change the world, and it didn't work. So we got about 50 companies and about 6 government agencies to at least partially adopt the Build Security In framework, and that was not changing the world, and you'd probably never have heard of the Build Security In framework here. So I got disgruntled. I left Carnegie Mellon. I went to go work for Rally Software. Anybody use Rally? Red Hat folks used to use it. It sounds like most of you switched to Jira now. That's good. So do you like the charts in Rally? Good. You guys know why I'm asking the question. So my team here out of Raleigh, North Carolina, built essentially all the charts that are in the Rally product and the framework that underlies them to do the analytics and stuff. And so that's essentially the work that I ended up doing for Rally. I also published the largest ever study correlating Agile practices, team size, how long the team stays together, the length of the iteration, and then non-Agile practices like XP practices, pair programming, et cetera, and even characteristics like the gender diversity on your team. I correlated all of those things with performance, productivity, predictability, quality, responsiveness. And that's the first talk I ever gave here at the Agile Day, Red Hat Agile Day, and so they've been inviting me back ever since based on that cred. And so that's how I'm mostly well known for that publication and those talks. I'm an active developer. So I have a dozen or so open source projects, one of which gets over 200,000 downloads a month. I write code almost every day. And this is unique for someone sort of in my position. But I feel it's really important. If you are trying to change the behavior of developers, which is exactly what the DevSecOps movement is trying to change the behavior of developers, you have no cred to actually accomplish that unless you're actively doing it. If you're a security person or an ops person hasn't really written heads down code in 5 years or never wrote heads down code, they're not gonna listen to you. They're gonna think you're dated. They're gonna think you don't know what you're talking about, and they're gonna feel okay about ignoring what you say. So I have to come in with that cred. So I maintain that cred with these open source projects. And now I work for Comcast. I work full time for Comcast. I fly up to Philly Monday, fly home on Thursday, and I do my consulting work from my couch on Friday. So that's my life now. The reason I'm at Comcast is that I have basically taken this framework, this build security in framework, and modernized it to sit on top of DevOps. And I actually think we have a much better chance of pulling this off. It's spreading wide at Comcast. In fact, the president of Comcast I had a series of meetings with him over the last few weeks, and he just signed off on essentially spreading the framework all across Comcast. So I'm using that as a big case study. I've got a book in the works. I've got a product that sort of packages the framework up in the works, software product, software as a service. And so I'm about to come out with all of that stuff, maybe next summer. So that's sort of the time frame for all of that. And this talk is essentially the content, the outline of the content for at least part of the book and the framework. So my definition of DevOps is empowered engineering teams taking ownership of how their product behaves in production. And this is a very different definition than a lot of other folks might have. So a lot of folks think when they hear DevOps, oh, well, that's a role. We've got a DevOps team. We're going to call them. And that's really just they've renamed the ops team to DevOps team. And you're laughing because you must work at an organization that did that. Or you've seen it. Okay, seen it. Or it's a role you hire for. We're going to hire a DevOps engineer, which is just a new name for an ops guy. Or they've renamed all development teams to DevOps teams. It doesn't matter whether they have a CI/CD pipeline that they trust to push product into production. No, that's not a criteria for being named a DevOps team. If you do development, you're now a DevOps team because that's just now what we call development teams at Comcast. And this is actually the case at Comcast. They call every team a DevOps team, no matter what level of maturity of DevOps that they're at. I really believe that this taking ownership part is the key. And it's not a role, it's not automation, it's not the use of a CI/CD tool that gets you to DevOps. It's this taking ownership of how your product performs in production. That the same people that are writing the code, the same team that's writing the code, maybe not the exact same people, but the same team that's writing the code are concerned about how their product performs in production. And I really think the sec is sort of optional. That's why I show it in brackets here. Because if you're really doing DevOps right, you're taking security into account, because that's an attribute of how well your product is doing in production. When you do this, you get fundamentally different decisions. Engineer gets called in on Saturday for a ops incident. When he goes into his planning meeting on Monday, he says to the team, hey guys or gals, if I just had this one extra piece of information in the log, I could have found the problem in minutes. And if I just had this one lever in the product that would carve out that kind of bad behavior, I could have gotten the system up and running for everybody else in minutes. Why don't we plan those features for this sprint? Somebody else in the room says, you know, ops has been asking for those two same features for 3 years now. And that's a real story. That really happened in one of the teams that I coach at Comcast. And it's just fundamentally different. When you own it, you think differently. It's sort of like if this was a hot plate and I put my hand on it and you felt the pain, right? I mean, I'm going to put my hand on the hot plate. I'm not think about it, right? You know, but if I feel the pain, then the first time I do that, ow, then I'm going to, no, hot plate, don't put hand there, right? So we've disconnected the pain with the people that are making the decisions that cause the pain to a large degree. Ops problems, security problems, developers are the ones causing that. So you actually have to not only get them to adopt practices, but you also have to get them to feel the pain. You have to actually invite them in on Saturday. Make sure that they're there. It's not the ops guys that carry the pager. It's some member of the development team. it might be an ops guy on the development team, but not every day that carries the pager, so to speak. Of course, nobody has pagers. DevOps it works. Dramatically faster time to market means happier customers, means more revenue. And so this is the Agile message, right? This is not different. In fact, DevOps in my mind is essentially Agile at scale. DevOps with the right process around it, and that's what my framework essentially does, is add a process around DevOps, is the successor to most Agile frameworks. And even the SAFe folks sort of get this. Their latest versions of SAFe are very DevOps oriented now, and earlier ones were not. 5 times lower rate of failure caused by changes, and almost 100 times, 2 orders of magnitude, faster recovery time from failures that are caused by changes. So the reality is, it's actually safer. That's the word I really want you to focus on there. It's actually safer to have a development team that can push code into production 12 times a day, because they can react when something happens in a 12th of a day. Whereas if you have a team that only pushes code to production once a quarter, and they go through this big, long validation process that's 3 weeks long or a month and a half long, you're laughing. Is that the reality at your organization? Then, yeah, there it's validated. You might feel safer. But when the shit hits the fan in production, what do? You go through this 3-week delay? No, you push out the emergency fix. But it's a lot harder because you're not geared up to do that, because your normal mode of operation is to have this 3-week of validation to do that. So it's actually safer to push code to production 12 times a day than it is to have a gating mentality about your validation. And so that's the point of this documentation, this survey stuff. So that's DevOps. What is software security? So when you say security to an engineer, a developer, he generally thinks a few things. He thinks authentication and authorization, the keys and the locks, and who has the rights to which doors, who has which keys, essentially, and encryption. So how do you hide the data? How do you make the data unobservable on the wire or on disk if somebody gets a hold of that disk? But that's not just security. That's sort of like focusing on the bank vault door only. This really thick 3 foot of steel with a really hard to pick lock that maybe has time delays and stuff associated with it. Imagine bolting that bank vault door, though, on any old room in any old building. What are the bad guys going to do? They're going to come right through the walls. And that's essentially where the vast majority of security attacks occur. They're not breaking your encryption. They're not, attacking your authentication and authorization systems for the most part. There are well-documented attacks against those things. And they get a lot of press because of that. But the vast majority of security incidents occur in your regular everyday code. Every input to your system from a user via a screen or a web page or an API or whatever, a file sent to you that is uploaded and processed. Every input to your system is a potential attack vector. And that's what the bad guys are usually leveraging. They're breaking through the walls. They're not picking the locks in general. And so that we have to change the mindset that security is just authentication, authorization, and encryption. Instead, you have to build features securely, any feature. And so this is sort of my biggest example of that. Does anyone know what that is? There. It's a SQL injection attack. So this guy knew that there was a OCR system that was hooked up to a camera in the parking lot where he works, and he wanted to see if it was vulnerable to SQL injection attack. So he changed his license plate. The camera was trying to record license plates coming in and out of the parking lot. He changed it to this, and he successfully brought the system down. Because the OCR system turned that into a SQL injection. So that's an input that you would never think someone would manipulate, but they did. They manipulated it. There's an input to the system. Build security in. So you've got to build security in. You can't bolt it on. You can't think of it after the fact. It's got to be sort of a core part of the thinking when developers are writing their code and their products. So build security in, this concept, puts the focus on the bank vault walls, but it also, more importantly, puts the focus on the people and the processes building those bank vault walls. So the developers writing the everyday code. So I have this DevOps Continuum I've been using for years, and I've grafted over the top of it a series of security practices. And I have a pretty deep background in security, but I did a lot of research to sort of try to make this comprehensive and cover everything. And I thought that this diagram and this approach to teaching people this would really move the needle and really help people, but it didn't really move the needle and didn't really help people very much because it's a lot of stuff in the end. There's 3 or 4 of these bullets on each of these cells, and if you walk a developer through this thing one at a time, he ends up pretty quickly sort of getting overloaded, and it's very hard for them to know what to do, what to change, how to change their behavior. I needed a more focused approach. I do want to stop on this one here, this analyze and learn step, because I actually think that's the key step in this whole cycle. So when you have a gating approach to security or operations, we have a group that validates something before it goes into production. When you have a gating approach and you find things in that validation step, you send that list back to the development team, right? And they fix those things, right? Then they run it through again, and that's how they think they get it out to production. They're trying to get their product into production. They want to get their product in production. They're going to do the minimum they have to do to satisfy that list of things that you've given them. You're actually defeating the most important step in the whole process by doing that, because they're motivated to get their product in production, and the way to do that is to minimally satisfy that very small list that you gave them. What you want them to do rather than that is you want them to take that list and patternize each row in that list. Find other instances like this first row, not just in this product, but in all the products that they maintain. Find and fix those before that even gets to the validation step. And then more importantly than that even, you want them to put in place some measure that prevents anything like this from ever happening again. This is sort of the learning 3-step for defects, or the learning 3-step for vulnerabilities that I sort of been teaching for a long time. And the gating approach defeats this. It actually makes it really hard for you to actually adopt this practice. Rather, do your pen testing, do your validation after the product is already in production. So I saw someone's shoulders go up when I said that, right? Wait till it gets in production, then do your validation. Why do that? It's too late then. It's already out there. Well, the reality is that your validation, even the very best pen testing groups, are only finding between 5 and 20% of the latent vulnerabilities in the product. You've already been shipping with 80 to 95% of the vulnerabilities still left in the product, even after using a gating approach. So you're not solving anything by making it be a gate. Do it after the fact, and then insist that they don't just resolve the issues in the validation. Insist that they tell you what they did to look for others like this. And you can encourage that by patternizing the response you give back to them. So don't just say, in this screen on this page with this input field, I was able to do X, Y, or Z. Say to them, it doesn't look like in general you have enough input validation to assure that people can't do SQL injection. So I want you to address your input validation for any user input field. That's a much better thing than I was able to get a SQL injection in this field on this page with this screen. And tell me what you're going to do in the future so you never write another SQL injection. It could be training. It could be a technology change. It could be a new rule you write in static analysis. But change something so that it means that no future developer who hasn't had this painful experience, who hasn't been burned by the hot plate himself yet, but put a wall up around the hot plate or a sign so that the new developers who've never experienced the pain from hitting the hot plate still know not to hit the hot plate, still figure out how to avoid that. That's the key thing for this whole thing. So this is still a very popular framework. It gets lots of retweets and is up there. But I never walk through the slide the steps one at a time anymore, ever. It hangs up on people's walls, and it makes for a nice eye candy Twitter, because it's not effective at getting developers to change their behavior. How do you get developers to change their behavior? So this is the lessons I learned largely with the research I did and the experience I got at Rally. I had a behavior change framework before for Agile, and I sort of let it sit on the shelf a little bit, but I pulled it off the shelf and adapted it for this environment. And this is now what's being highly effective at Comcast and what my whole book is sort of based upon. It's a three-part framework. The first part of the framework, it has to deal with sort of getting the cred, winning the hearts and minds, making sure they know you know where they're coming from. That's the first part. And so I've got some very concrete things to build this trust level between ops folks and developers and security folks and developers. And it's fairly formulaic. And any group who wants to do what I'm talking about can adopt this and get this first step with almost no pain. It's been highly effective. Build security in more than bolt it on. Anyone recognize the pattern of that statement there? Something what? Yeah. Right. Bolt on security is Franken security. Exactly. Yeah. Rather than build it in. But that's exactly what I'm getting at there. But notice how it says build security in more than bolt it on. The Agile Manifesto is something over something else, right? It doesn't mean that the thing after the more than is not valuable. It just means that the thing before that is the thing that we're emphasizing with this initiative, with this motion. Did you have a question, or you just wanted maybe? I already answered. Okay, so we'll hand that around next time. Rely on empowered engineering teams more than security specialists. We talked about security specialists can't keep up. Ops teams can't keep up. Extra validation, sort of post facto, throw it over the wall validation can't keep up with DevOps teams. So you've got to make the development team do it. And you got to do it with automation too. Implement features securely. This is focused on the bank vault walls, not just the door. Rely on continuous learning. That's just what I was talking about a minute ago. And build on culture change more than policy enforcement. Is anyone sort of aware of the security policies for software products at their organization? Show of hands. You're aware of them. Okay, great. Are any of you involved in sort of maintaining or enforcing, or you are? Okay, great, wonderful. So, this, I'm going to put you guys on the spot a little bit, and maybe you'll try to defend your policy sort of work. But I'm going to put you on the spot a little. Do you ever have developers hide from you? You're not the policy enforcers, probably, though. You're just involved in the. It's mandatory for you guys. Okay. So a lot of times, the security policies, developers are like, well, I know there's over there, but nobody's told me I have to do those today. So we're just going to do what we're going to do today. And then they go like that for months, and they're like, I guess those things don't really matter that much. Then one day, somebody comes in and they do an audit and they find out that you're not compliant on these 5 things. And you go, okay, I'm not compliant on these 5 things. I'll fix these 5 things. You've defeated the learning approach with that. Frequently, though, you then get much better at hiding from those auditors. And I develop the teams that are like, let's put out a version that we know has these 3 big things in it so that they find those really fast. Because that's the way our pen testing group at Comcast works, is they go for either 3 weeks of trying to break it or until they find 3 criticals. So they just have to seed it with 3 criticals they know how to fix. And then boom, they're done with the validation. That's a little extreme. And I had a team tell me they did that. I'm not sure if they really did or not, but they told me they did that. Policy enforcement is just the wrong culture. It's just, if they don't understand why it is they should be doing it, then they're never going to really do it. They're going to maybe get past the checks. That's okay. But it isn't really going to get you beyond that 5 to 20% of latent vulnerabilities. I also have this thing called the pledge, and this is actually the most powerful tool in my arsenal here. Surprisingly, I didn't realize it. I developed it fairly recently at Comcast. And basically what it says is, we trust you. We, the security group, has now adopted this pledge. This was hard. There's 400 people in the security group at Comcast. And I had to walk around each of those subgroups at Comcast and say, I want to make this pledge for us to every development team. Can you sign up for this? Can you support this? And I got a lot of, hell no. I got a few folks who are like, yeah, I've been saying that for a long time, but as well. And in the end, I had to get the CISO at Comcast to essentially say, yes, this is our policy. And if you're not on board with this, come see me and we'll explain it to you so you will be on board with it. That's what happened in this policy, because it's fundamentally different than the mindset that you hear most ops groups and most security groups have. We trust you. We trust you to do the right thing. We know you want to do the right thing. That's not the way developers and security folks sort of interact in the past, right? The security folks are like, those developers are just putting out crap that's going to get us hacked, right? That's how the security folks think, right? Or the ops folks, those developers are just putting out crap that's going to crash and bring our systems down, right? That's how those folks think. And the developers think those security folks have all these requirements on me and they don't explain them, and I don't really have any idea of the tooling, how to do what they're asking, and I don't have time for it because my boss is not telling me to work on that. My boss is telling me to get new features out. And so the developers have a fundamentally different sort of way of working. And we start off by saying, we trust you. We trust that you will make trade-off decisions. And at times, you're going to trade off security for something else, some other bigger business risk. I've got a super awesome real-life story at Comcast that I use inside of Comcast, and I've started to tell it outside, and I have a little time, so I'll give you the background with it. But about 5 or 6 years ago, Comcast recognized that they had an existential threat with cord cutting, right? Cord cutters, Netflix, right? They're not going to sign up for video, and the vast majority of Comcast income was video. They said, we're not going to hold that change back forever. It's a disruptive change, and we understand it's coming. We're not going to hold it back forever, but we need something that'll buy us time to shift our revenue stream over to content and internet connectivity. And we want to establish this development group called the X1 group at Comcast to basically create such a compelling video experience, a Netflix-like video experience, that's what they said, or better, such that people don't want to cut the cord for Comcast. And they pulled it off because that team said, we're not going to worry about security. We're not going to worry about reliability. We're not going to worry about performance. We are going to build the most compelling user experience. We're going to get out in front of beta customers really early, and we're going to evolve it really rapidly till it becomes the best interface in the industry. It's the only user interface to ever have won an Emmy Award, and it's now won 3 Emmy Awards. The voice remote, Comcast was the first folks with the production voice remote is a big part of it. But the fact that when you say Outlander into the voice remote and it shows you the 5 different places that you can watch Outlander, including ones that Comcast does not support, it lists all of them for you, is just a huge sort of boon for, because, well, I have Netflix. It says I can watch that on Netflix. Let me go over to my Netflix. So they essentially said, okay, we know you're going to have Netflix, but we want you to keep the X1 box anyway, because we'll tell you when you could get it for free on Netflix. So we encourage folks, we leverage that change. That Netflix change could have been disruptive and destructive, but we leveraged that change in the industry to actually accomplish this goal. They would not have succeeded. They would never have shipped if they were forced to comply with all the security and ops policies while they were developing. So it's a very great story of a conscious decision to trade off security and operations concerns for business concerns, a bigger business risk, and solve the business risk. Now, of course, we've gone back and we've added a lot of reliability, performance, capability, and security to the X1 system, and it's the primary system for Comcast Video now. So yeah, you get to you own it now. You get to make all the trade-off decisions. You can even decide not to do certain security things. But we want to make sure when you make those trade-off decisions, you have all the information, that you know how risky it is. We want to make sure that if you get a request like, pushed back from the validation group that says you must do X, Y, and Z, we want you to know who to call from the security group that will come in with a Tiger team, and they will help you do that thing if it's complicated or difficult. Or better yet, the Tiger team job is to help people immediately, but then immediately go back to the office and create a self-service thing that makes it easy for anybody to do that. That's the sort of approach that we want to take. So we're going back to the office, and we're lowering the cost to effort side of these things that we're asking you to do. If we say, don't put credentials in source code repositories, does anybody know what I'm talking about? Credentials in source code? Have you ever seen one of your development teams put? Oh, yeah. So why do they do that? It's easy, exactly. It's the path of least resistance. We had a requirement for years at Comcast, many years, decades. Don't put secrets in source code repositories. Totally ignored, totally unenforced. I start meeting with teams. I'm like saying, we encourage you not to do this. And they're like, great, okay, fine. How do I not do that? What's the easy way to not do that? And I went, let me go ask someone. And I went back, and they're like, well, you could do, and someone describes this big, long, complicated thing. Or you could do, I think, but I don't know anyone who's actually doing it that way. And that's the answer I got from my own security people, the people that are insisting upon this policy in the first place. Like, how can you do that? How can you have a policy like that, when there's no easy way for them to actually comply with it? They have to invent new cloth, whole cloth, in order to, they have to go slaughter the cow to eat the steak, right? You can't do that. So we took that requirement out of the policies. This was tough. I was very hard to do. I said, I want us to remove this because I don't want them to ignore any of them in the future. And I know they should ignore this one. I'm advising them to ignore this one. So I don't want to say that. I don't want to have any broken windows. So let's remove that from the policies and let's put together a program to have a self-service secrets as a service offering that works with every single different CI/CD pipeline that we have inside a company. Well, that's 6 different pipeline technology stacks. Yes, that's the requirements for this secrets as a service. It must go where they are. You can't make them switch out of Jenkins to whatever you chose in order to use this. Hey, you're using Jenkins. Make it work with Jenkins before we insist upon it. We did that. There's a 6-month-long effort. It launched. It is the second most popular tool now at Comcast across developers, behind GitHub Enterprise. So we have no standardized tooling at Comcast, if you can believe that. Basically, development teams get to pick what they want. So things that get a lot of market share inside of Comcast get it because they like it. And so they really like GitHub Enterprise, and they really like this secrets as a service offering. It was that good. We did that good of a job of it. And we're going to be working with you guys not only when there's a security incident. I don't want you to associate every time you get burned with the hot plate with me showing up at your door. I want you to, that's going to happen because that's the reality, right? But I want to have talked to you at least twice. This used to say 10x, and my security buddies said I can't sign up for 10x. Can you sign up for 5x? I can't sign up for 5x. Can you sign up for 2x? I guess we can sign up for 2x. So yeah, this was tough to get approved. And we no longer think of ourselves as gatekeepers. We are not gatekeepers. We are now toolsmiths and advisors and assisters. That is now our role. We are not gatekeepers anymore. This is tough still to get this happen. So questions about that before I move on? Thoughts about that? Anybody have a security experience with a security organization with a story to tell? Maybe one of you guys who's been involved with it? Around that? Okay. I'll keep going then. So I talked about trust early on. I have a whole talk. In fact, I just gave it on a webinar, All Day DevOps, yesterday, called The Trust Algorithm. And I also have a 5-part blog series up on DevSecOpsDays.com. But the idea here is a formulaic way that you can teach people to build trust between organizations. And when my supervisor at Comcast said to me, he said the phrase, "Trust is not a formula, Larry. You can't teach people how to build trust. They either have it or they don't." I'm like, it is a formula. You can, and let me show you. So he sort of challenged me to create this content. So trust equals credibility plus reliability plus empathy. Credibility means, do you know what you say you do? You know your stuff. Reliability is, do you do what you say you're going to do? So say do. And empathy is can you relate to the experiences and pains of the people who you're trying to influence? All over apparent self-interest. Now, apparent self-interest is never zero. Like, I wouldn't be having a conversation with you, developer, if I didn't get something out of the conversation. I mean, there's something in it for me, obviously. So the goal is not to get this to zero, because then it would be infinite. It doesn't work math-wise either. But the goal is to just keep this minimal and maximize the terms in the numerator. And so the key idea for the term in the numerator for credibility is hire developers. I have staffed my DevSecOps transformation team at Comcast with all developers. In about a week, I can teach them everything they need to know about security. They do not have to have any security certifications. You know how hard this was to get past the HR people at Comcast? I can't believe the number of meetings I had to go through to get the. It's like, well, you want people to be doing security. They need to have experience with security. I'm like, no, I don't want them to have experience with security. I want them to have experience with development. But they're not going to be writing code. Why are you doing that? Doesn't make any sense. Like, yes, it makes perfect sense, because their job is not to do security. Their job is to get developers to do security. So that's the key. Credibility. Make sure the people talking to development teams are developers. And I don't just mean developers 5 years ago. I mean active heads down developers today. Yes. Yes, exactly. The best hackers are the best developers. Absolutely. If you put those acronyms, those security acronyms in the job description, you will get flooded with people that have just gone to a week-long course and taken a test and really aren't developers and really aren't very good at security, at least from the way I like to think about security. So I basically don't hire any of those people. I hire only developers, and I teach them. I have about a week-long course that I put them all through that teaches them security. Hiring developers. So I thought when I started at Comcast, my mission, my mandate from my bosses, the people who I convinced to hire me, was security. But the whole framework is DevSecOps. So it's really best fit, not on top of a waterfall process, but on top of a DevOps process. But they claimed every team was a DevOps team when I started. So, okay, well, that makes it easy. What I found is that a lot of them are cargo cult DevOps. Has anyone heard the phrase cargo cult agile? Yeah. Does anyone know where the phrase comes from? Absolutely. Right, because the Americans just put the coconuts on their ears and spoke into the banana, and then the gods would send down this flying magic creature with the supplies. So, we just need to put the coconuts on our ears and talk into the banana, and we should get the supplies. And then when they did that and it didn't work, they wondered, like, why didn't it work? Why didn't Agile work here? Well, you didn't understand why they were talking into this elongated thing. It wasn't a banana, and those weren't coconuts on their ears. You have to understand what it is that you're actually doing. We had a lot of that Comcast. And so now I've got a proposal out. It hasn't been funded yet, to essentially do this same program at Comcast, except up our DevOps game. And so the target audience for my current work is primarily teams that have already got those skills and already got that mindset. But if in order to expand beyond that, and that's only about 40% of the folks generously at Comcast are truly doing real DevOps. In order to get another 40%, I'm going to have to actually hire folks. And the first step is, do you meet certain requirements for DevOps? I have a single question litmus test for whether or not a team is DevOps or not. And you've got a question in the back here. I'll come to you back to you in a second. That question is, to what environment do you trust your pipeline to automatically escalate to? So if they say, well, we don't trust the gauntlet of our CI/CD pipeline to escalate to any environment, a human has to sort of push a button to even launch that escalation. It's just a task in Jenkins. They're using Jenkins as a task runner. They're not using Jenkins to coordinate with their teammates, to do continuous integration. So that very quickly sort of answers that question. And when I know I've got a team that doesn't push at least to staging automatically from their CI/CD pipeline, that they have at least a little bit of remediation work to do before they're really ready for everything that I'm talking about. But there's a lot of practices that I can do without that. I can give them secure coding training. I can get a threat model done on their app. I can do a few things without them being truly CI/CD. Question in the back.
That's what I was going to ask you. Like, so there's obviously a level you have to be at before you're coming in with this type of solution. Like, do you have what that is? Like, or? Well,
so I couldn't live with that constraint. In order to do the whole solution, and you won't actually see the whole thing. You'll see a subset of it in a few slides here. In order to do the whole solution, you have to be doing true DevOps. But to do the stuff in the upper left corner, the most important bang for the buck stuff, most of those things you can graft on top of even a waterfall process. And so I work with the team wherever they are, and my goal is to get them on the path of improvement. And if the next step to do an improvement that will help with security is for them to spend a year and develop a test suite that really they trust to escalate, then that's the next step. And we essentially put them on hold with their maturity from a security perspective until they accomplish that next step. But we want everybody on the path of improvement. I'm going to move on because I've got a few more slides, and there was another question, though. But you sure? Yeah. Okay. So three-part framework. First part is win their hearts and minds. Second part is make it easy for them to know what it is you're asking them to do. And so I have this table. This actually is the whole thing here. It's 28 practices. I think maybe it's a little more than that now in the latest incarnation. And I sit down with the team, and I literally go through, takes 90 minutes, and I have 2 other facilitators that do this, most of this. I do this rarely now because I created the system, and while I was evolving it, I was meeting directly with the teams. But I have folks who are doing this for me now. But they sit down with the team, 90 minutes, walk through every cell, color code it. Bright green means we're really doing it well. Slightly lighter green means, we're on the path to doing it well, but we aren't there yet. And even lighter green is we're just sort of getting started, or we're thinking about it, we have plans to do it. And then white means, hey, I didn't even know about that thing until today. We have definitely not thought about it before today. And blue means unassessed, means that we didn't assess that capability. Gray means you don't think it's worth it. You're making a trade-off for it. And dark gray means the organization is not geared up to do it well. So we've essentially grayed out the entire secrets as a service line during that time period where we had this mandate of expectations, but they couldn't solve them really easy. So we grayed it out. So we said, it's coming, we're working on it, but we know it's not easy for you to do, so we're dark graying it out for you. Well, the original version of this was red, amber, green. And the problem with that is that teams then get into this mindset of, I don't want anything red. And so they start arguing with you, and then you're in a confrontational relationship with them. And that is fundamentally the number one thing I'm trying to avoid. I want them to trust us. I want them to come to us. I want them to really believe we are truly helpful folks for them. If they think we're the guys giving them red marks, that was really bad. So we switched to these shades of green and white approach after trying it. So that's why you have to have a big case study like an organization at Comcast before you launch a thing like this. Now, when I met with Tony Warner, the president of Comcast, the last 3 weeks, he's like, why is it not red, amber, green? So maybe I should give a version for him that's red, amber, green, but the version for the teams just says white. I don't know. But yeah, he got it eventually. It took him about 30 seconds to get it, but he eventually got it. He's like, oh, okay, I understand. I think he was sort of giving me the benefit of the doubt a little bit. Oh, this kumbaya agile guy I gotta humor him a little. I can't push him too hard, right? But yeah, so that's a good question. I'm not going to go over this. This is a zoom in of a little thing, so I read a few of them, but I just don't have the time left to do that today. So after we do the self-assessment, we ask the team to pick 1 to 3, no more than 3, and only 3 if you're really, they're low-hanging fruit for you. 1 to 3 things you want to actually turn green, cells you want to turn green in the next quarter. That's all I want you to do. Well, we need to do all these. I'm like, yeah, eventually, maybe, okay, that's fine. And if you do all of them before I come back a quarter from now, that's great. I'm not going to ding you for that. But I want you to commit to me. I want the whole team with a fist of 5 voting right here in the room. I want you all to commit that you're going to do this in the next quarter. And that means you're going to deal with getting manager approval for it, or I'm going to help you with it, or whatever. And so when they pick these 1 to 3 things, I go back to the office and I start to marshal my resources. If they need logins to tools, I get them for them immediately. If they need someone to come out and meet with them to actually configure their CI/CD pipeline for these tools, I schedule that immediately. So within a day after I meet with the team, that work is scheduled with the right people on my side, on the security side, and it happens. That's the reliability of the trust algorithm. Step 3 is get management involved. They need to be able to see what's going on, and they need to be able to set goals. They need to feel like they're part of this whole thing. And this is learning I had to have at Comcast. You only get about 20% of the mind share of the teams with a grassroots, this is the right thing, I can convince you it's the right thing, let's do it, you only get about 20%. The bleeding edge people and the early adopters is all you get. To get the early majority even, and certainly the late majority and the laggards, if you guys familiar with that adoption curve mentality, to get those folks, you need executive sponsorship. So we get Tony. Previously we did it with one department, but now Tony has decided to set this goal for the org. We picked only 6 of the cells in that 28 cell thing, but we set a date that every team will actually comply with by this date. Now, we missed the Q1 2018 date for Yellow Belt pretty hard, but and actually did a lot better than that. This is an example from before that was over with. So we're pretty close to 100% here now on that one. So the goal setting is really important at large organizations because then that trickles down to the department heads, that trickles down to the managers, that trickles down to the individuals, and then they have permission to not build features, instead to do these upgrades to their process so that they can. So I have just 4 minutes left. So I'm going to ask for your advice, though. So these levels, I've had trouble sort of figuring out what to do with the level-wise, and I've tried a bunch of different things. So originally it was set up as a Likert scale, where each thing was a statement. 100% of our folks have been through Yellow Belt training. And then you either strongly agreed with that or strongly disagreed with that. But it wasn't like I had to translate. Strongly agree really means everyone has done it, and for every instance. So it was a little awkward for me. I didn't like the Likert scale. Sally Alata has built a whole company called Agility Health Radar around her approach, and she uses crawl, walk, run, fly. Well, I tried that, and as people were like, crawl, we're not even crawling. We're just sort of like the baby laying on its back. What do I do? How do I mark that for this? And running sounds pretty good. We're going to stop at running. We're not even going to go to flying. Flying's scary. We're just going to go to running. And so it just fell down for me. I don't like it. So I'm asking for your advice, but I'm sort of leading you a little bit more than I probably should. We tried the pink, just colors. We didn't even label them, what they meant. We just did red, pink, amber, light green, dark green, and we didn't even label what they meant. That didn't work either. Actually, that worked pretty well. I have to say that worked pretty well. I just didn't like it. Okay, that worked pretty well, except for the fact that the teams didn't like anything we marked red. Soil, seed, sprout, stem, sustain. My daughter came up with this one. You guys like that one, huh? So she's looking for a job. So if marketing, in the area even, she lives in Greensboro. She'd gladly. Anyway, discovering, discussing, deciding, or decided, doing, deployed. I think that was another alternative that my daughter. And then our current thinking is this thing we call WACT. You progress from thoughts to words to actions to culture. And so and then we have the ability for you to say, this is not worth it for our context. We're never going to do this. And we have the ability to say, the organization doesn't make this easy. I have permission not to do this. So we color code some things that way for your. So those are I've led you obviously way too much for a fair vote, but I'm going to ask for a vote. We'll do this real quickly. How many people like the Likert scale best? You can vote for more than one if you strongly like the Likert scale. One person, 2 people. How many people like crawl, walk, run, fly? 1, 2, 3. So 2, 3, 4. 4. How many people like red, pink, amber, light green, green? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You had your hand up, right? No? 6. Is that it? Okay. 6. Okay, we're getting better. Soil, seed, sprout, stem, sustain. Ooh, my daughter's going to be so upset with me. Well, wait, keep them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10. Wow. Discovering, deciding, discussing, decided. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Almost as much as soil, seed, sprouts. Thoughts, words, actions, culture. And I don't know how fair this is, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Woo! Yeah. I think not very fair, but at least I can claim that we did that. My wife came up with that one, by the way. She's not looking for a job.
Haven't thought about it yet.
Yeah, so we had not thought about this practice. Is the definition of thoughts. The reason it's thoughts instead of not thoughts is because by the time I explain it to them enough for them to rate it, they thought about it. So everybody was claiming thoughts at least. So we had something before thoughts, and then I never used it because they're like, well, we just thought about it, so we're going to be thoughts, right? We're going to be at least a little bit green, right? So. But they still do that. We still get to words. If they've made plans, if it gets on their plan for the next quarter, it gets to this color green immediately. So even in the first meeting I have with them, they can go from white to a light shade of green just by committing to do it in the next quarter. So that's helpful. Yes. Accommodation, like accepting the risk.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Accommodation. So it would be thwacka.
Thwacked. That works. You can say it. Okay, thanks, guys. So I have some content on tools. We don't have time to go over that today, but it's similar to the content overlaid. There's 2 tool categories I emphasize. I'll leave you with the slides here to come back to. And then that's the end of my deck here. So please hook up with me on LinkedIn. Please read my blog series. If you want to hear more about the toys, tools stuff, then hit me up and I'll be glad to send it to you. I just sort of teased it here a little bit for you. We don't have time for questions during the session, but I'll stay here and clean up because there is a break. And you guys can come up and ask me questions one-on-one during the break. Thank you.